bringing you a steady stream of thought-provoking ideas and cutting-edge innovation. You're listening to Society and the State. Life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Brian Hyde.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 121 and a bit of a rant. We are heading in, Brian, to this weekend when we are publishing this episode, another daylight saving time shift. And I didn't used to care about this until I became a parent of a young child.
Then you know.
And then you know. Then you feel it in your bones. The rage comes on you. And this is an interesting issue because it's a public policy question. It's can and should, government be in the business of shifting and changing time? And this is a very controversial policy. It's one I know that voters are sometimes asked to weigh in on. I know in our state, Utah, there was a big poll that was done. It's on the ballot in California. We certainly have a couple states that have that don't participate. And then, of course, there's a bunch of other countries. I know most recently, and we'll link to a story on this on the show notes page, which is societyandthestate.com/121. The European Commission recently did a poll. I had taken note of this previously, and the results are out as of a couple months ago. And this was for all of the different member states that are participating. I believe there's 28 European nations that participate in this regime, this system. And the online poll showed that 80% of Europeans oppose, changing time back and forth. So this is certainly not just an American thing. And as I recall the history here, there's this popular notion that Benjamin Franklin popularized and promoted daylight savings, which, as I learned, is actually mythical. It's not true.
So we can't blame him.
We cannot blame him.
All right.
And nonetheless, it's been implemented and incorporated in many countries for a lot of time. And obviously, Brian, let me ask you. As you understand it, what is the purpose? I've heard so many justifications for the proponents of using this system. From your vantage point, what is the kind of main argument or main reason why people like or support a system of daylight saving time?
The chances are good I'm going to just be repeating some urban legend, but I always grew up understanding daylight savings time had to do with allowing more productive hours. So essentially we shift the time so we get an extra hour of daylight at a time when, the sun, the actual length of the day is shorter.
Yeah, and I think that's correct as I understand it. In fact, pre-electricity, if you look at a lot of European countries where this was starting, from what I recall, it was an effort to reduce the need for candle and oil and so forth. You could limit the consumption of scarce resources by adjusting your schedule to match sunlight. And what's interesting, of course, about this is because the way that the globe is shaped and the tilt of the axis and so forth, the countries along the hemisphere do not the equator, I should say, do not participate in this because the way that they are rotating around the sun, they do not have kind of the ebb and flow of sunlight like we do. The sunrise times do not vary in the countries around the equator enough to justify this program. And then some countries observe it in some regions only. So like southern Brazil observe it, but Brazil near the equator does not participate. And, in Asia, they don't do this. In Africa, they don't do this. So really, this is like a minority of the world that participates in this program, heavily in North America, heavily in Europe, and not really a lot of other places. So the rest of the world is getting along just fine and is being very productive from an economic, industrial standpoint. And as I said, kind of from the rant side, this is kind of like, Brian, I feel the principle of that which is seen and that which is not seen. Like, you see the clock shifting and you see that you have more productive sunlight hours. But with a policy like this, a lot of people don't take note of the things they don't see. The mom who's frustrated because now her kid's sleep schedule is thrown off and it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks, and that causes her sleep deprivation because they're thrown off. They wake up, 5 times in the middle of the night because they're just off their, pattern. So now the mom doesn't get sleep and she's irritable, or the dad, or the whatever. And there's a lot of negative aspects that come with manipulating schedules in this way. You're not just changing time. You're, of course, changing the schedules as well, and things are shifting throughout the year based on daylight saving time. And so I just worry that a lot of times the public policymakers don't take into account the harm that this program can actually bring people.
Well, and, I like daylight savings as an idea once a year. The fallback part where I get an extra hour of sleep. Even my kids have caught on. Oh, we get to sleep in an extra hour. They like that. But it's not worth it for what it does in the spring. And, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but I am going to complain. I'm getting older. And my body clock, my circadian rhythms do not adjust as quickly. What used to, I could bounce back after a couple of days after the time shift. It takes a couple of weeks before I feel like myself again. And I see it in my kids' behavior as well. So I kind of like you'd mentioned some of the states like Arizona that don't do it. I'd rather just let the chips fall where they may, let time go as it goes, and we'll adjust. But it seems like that would be easier than trying to artificially time shift everyone.
And my wife's family is from Arizona, and I'll tell you, one of the most awkward things about this is never being able to keep straight what time it is over there. Wait, can I call them right now? Is it too early? What, are they ahead of us? Are they behind? No, are we the same now? And the incongruence of different times, I think, is part of the challenge, where everyone is like shifting back and forth, and then some people are not. And I think increasingly you're going to see other states. I mean, I know here in our state there's been a push to let us match Arizona as well. And so I think as more and more states kind of come on board and abandon the system, it's going to create even more complications. I think of this, Brian, from just a business perspective of having to keep that track. And if you're selling software and computers, you're having to kind of programmatically account for, okay, are you in this state, or are you in that state, or what's your time zone, and is it daylight saving or not? Just the complexity of managing that. As you point out, I think it would just be better to leave it to the ebb and flow of nature rather than arbitrariness.
To be fair, technology has made it a lot easier. My iPhone updates itself, my watch updates itself, and for all the years that I've worked in radio, daylight savings used to be a nightmare because somebody had to be at the station at 2 o'clock in the morning whenever it happened to make sure that everything adjusted and, that the clocks weren't off. Now computers will take care of that. But still, there's the human toll, as you mentioned, and that's probably where my concern lies today. Technology's great, but it still doesn't save the fact that I'm wrecked for a week or so after daylight savings.
And, at the end of the day, those who want to enjoy more sunlight in their day as the sunrise is shifting are welcome to do so, right? I think they want society to follow suit, and they want, the sports programs to be later in the evening when there's more sunlight and so forth. But in my mind, those who want to shift their work schedule or their hobbies or whatever to match changing sunlight, let them do it. But they're basically using the force of government to compel the rest of us to go along with this changing system. And at the end of the day, I think that's one of the biggest rubs is I can understand, because of the way the world works, the way the globe is spinning around the sun, there have to be, clearly by nature, there would be kind of different time zones based on where you're at any given day. That part is plainly obvious and predictable and standard. You said it once, and obviously California is going to be in a different time zone than New York or Florida. That part is understandable, but this is arbitrary. It's a problem when we've empowered government to basically compel us to change back and forth. And again, because of the harms that it can bring, more so than an annoyance. I mean, I remember when this survey was done here in Utah, asking voters about what they feel about it. When you would read through the comments of people who opposed the program of changing time back and forth, and the stories they would share, it was really illustrative to realize, oh my gosh, like this is not just I'm kind of, get off my lawn, right? Stop changing my clock. I don't like it. It's actually like causing grief and stress and frustration and sleep deprivation and all of these problems that could be avoided. And so at the end of the day, I just think that part of this is kind of the libertarian aspect of like, get the government out of my business kind of thing. Get the government out of the time industrial complex and have it stop changing things.
No, I'm with you. Although, doesn't it feel good to at least get this off your chest?
Oh, yeah. Ranting,
people are talking about it.
Ranting is great, and whenever this issue comes up for these big kind of campaigns and votes, it's passionate and split down the middle. I will concede. Most things I've seen and the few polls I've looked at, I should look up and see if there's kind of an American national poll. Certainly the European one was lopsided, but the limited local polls I've seen are very divided. And it leads me to question how much change we're actually going to get when things are that split. But I'm kind of with you. Like, you can enjoy getting that extra hour, but then you really pay for it at the end.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And 6 months later, you get to pay for that extra hour of sleep that you enjoyed by taking an hour away. I don't know what it would take. I mean, obviously, you mentioned this is it's a governmental decision. Is there somebody who lobbies lawmakers to keep this? Someone who benefits from it?
I don't know.
Could they be bought off?
Well, but this was interesting, too, as I think about some of the harms. I'm reminded, in fact, I should link to this. There was a study a couple years ago, or I think last year, in the American Economic Journal, and they estimated that the transition into daylight saving time caused over 30 deaths and a social cost of nearly $300 million every year, primarily by increasing sleep deprivation. So I thought that was like, it's not just, oh, bummer, I'm sleep deprived, I don't feel good. It's like, no, this can actually cause fatalities on the road. This is causing economic loss. And so there are actually tangible material losses. If you have even one death due to sleep deprivation, I'm sorry, but being able to, play more soccer games for your kids in the evening during the summer may sound all well and good, but if it comes at the expense of intentionally subjecting people to sleep deprivation and therefore potential and actual fatalities on the road, it seems to me on that basis alone we ought to rethink this policy, because then the government's at fault.
And if someone really wants extra daylight, look, move to Alaska. And, for a few months out of this summers in Alaska, I freaked out when I was in Anchorage about 10 years ago. And I was there the very first week in July. And it was astonishing how long it stayed light. I mean, at 11 o'clock at night, it was light enough on the street. You could read a newspaper by natural light.
Wow.
I went to bed. I actually woke up about 5 o'clock in the morning, looked out my window. It was light again. It was like there wasn't even any night. There was some darkness, but, it's great. Now, the price you pay for that is the other 6 months of the year, you're in darkness a lot. In fact, at the shortest day of the year, the sun rises about 9 in the morning and it's setting by 2 in the afternoon.
Wow.
That would be tough.
That would throw you off, just kind of your rhythm. I know my wife lived in Sweden for a while, and just being that close to the North Pole at the top, it's like light all the time, and your body kind of gets thrown off of its rhythm. At the end of the day, get the government out of the time industrial complex.
Hear, hear.
I just think we can do without this. And to be fair, I think there's some compelling arguments. I mean, clearly the winners of this program are retailers, sporting goods makers, businesses that benefit from extra sunlight in the afternoon during the warm season of the year, right? It's clear that there is a narrow benefit, but you are putting that narrow benefit on the backs of the many. Your concentrated benefits is the economic principle. You're concentrating the benefits on these folks, and you're dispersing the costs among the many. You're basically socializing the economic gain for these companies, these industries, and the people who participate in them to benefit at the expense of the many. And so basically this is socialism in time. This is clock socialism. I don't know.
There's nowhere they won't go.
We must fight socialism everywhere we can. Okay, well, end rant. That's good enough. Here we go into the weekend. We're going to have our circadian rhythm manipulated arbitrarily once again by the government. They infect and infest every aspect of our lives, including our sleep. There's nowhere we go that they won't. So enjoy your daylight saving. Are we ending or are we starting? I always get, spring forward, fall backward. So we're falling backward. This is why I have a wife. She helps remind me of these things.
Got to use your Google foo when in doubt.
Thanks, everyone. Episode 121. Check out the Society Notes page. I linked the poll up there. As well as that economic study I mentioned. It's worth kind of taking a look at and contemplating. societyandthestate.com/121. We talked with Ben Swan in the last episode a little bit about social media censorship. We've talked previously about propaganda. The guest for our next episode, we're going to talk about how to balance some of the propaganda on the radio airways. Very interesting organization that's getting set up, and so stick around. Make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends. We'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.